I did the outro instead of the intro. Dang it. Okay. Forget that. Just never mind. Ignore that. Here we go. I'm sure you're always perfect. You never get anything wrong like that.
I think it just makes it fun. Like we're just giving you variety. That's all.
Just so much fun. Yeah, I don't need the added gray. Thank you, Sharon. But good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, I think it's ironic we do these on Mondays. I think it just makes it more fun. It's always a Monday here, so we always just like to highlight the Mondayness of the Mondays. Mm-hmm. Well, welcome to the latest episode of the Project Failure Files. This series is for anyone who manages projects for a living, whether it's a Monday or a Tuesday or a Wednesday, or your project program, operational management. Maybe you're an assistant project manager. Maybe you're a junior project manager. Maybe you own your own business. Maybe you're a consultant. Maybe you wear all the hats. Whatever. This weekly series is for you. I'm Sharon Weaver, CEO of Smarter Consulting.
And I am Christian Buckley, the founder of Collab Talk. And welcome to another episode of our series where Sharon and I will explore project management topics from the perspective of what not to do to manage projects. In each episode of our series, we'll talk about the common pitfalls, sharing personal stories and experiences, and explore strategies and best practices to help. I always feel like I need to do the air quotes, best practices to help you to be successful.
Best practices, better practices, bestest practices, whatever works for you.
Most bestest practices.
Yes. Practices. So in this episode, we are talking about one of the absolute surest ways that your project can succeed. We're going to talk about champion change, the role of internal champions.
Yeah, this is identifying the champions within the ranks of your organization and supporting them, nurturing them. It's a huge factor in just about any project's success.
Yeah, and a champion can come from literally anywhere in the organization. And I think this is one of the things a lot of times we don't understand the difference between like sponsors and stakeholders and champions. So this is going to be a great topic.
And it's, well, I guess the first step is always in identifying them, looking for them. And this often is like, you have to consciously be looking for them to find them. They're out there. They're always going to be there. And then the next question is, do you have the support system in place for them? So does your culture of your organization support the champions, recognize them for what they do? Because the funny thing that happens, Sharon, I know you know this, so we'll talk about it, is the better you support them, the more you make that, you surface that support, more people want to step up and be champions for various projects.
Yeah, and it always comes back to culture every single time. This should be a fantastic discussion. Hopefully we have time to squeeze in all of our combined thoughts on this topic.
I know this is yet again one of those things that we could confidently talk for a couple hours just on this. But as with every episode, please feel free to comment throughout the episode, share your experiences and any great examples or feedback that you may have missed. And I'll be dropping in the banners that have how you can contact us, where you could share your stories, find past episodes, all that kind of stuff.
So let's talk about what the difference is between us, a project sponsor, and a project champion. And let's just kind of kick it off by talking about the differences between that.
Yeah, I know in another episode, we're going to get in and talk about, the sponsor. So sometimes you talk about, okay, this project champion where you're really talking about the project sponsor, the senior leader that has greenlit the project, said yes to the budget, has the signature authority. Maybe that's you and you're driving the project, but it's more likely for the vast majority of people in a project management role that you're executing on the project, but there's an executive, a leader, a sponsor that is championing the project. But this we're talking about, this usually comes from the rank and file in the organization. So being in IT, I mean, we've both seen this scenario where there's a new technology and you find somebody who maybe had experience with that new technology, new to this organization, but they have experience from a previous company that they worked for, or they're just super passionate about it. They want to become like the go-to expert for that technology or that project. And so they, it's not an official title. They just kind of step up and become one of the go-to people that helps answer questions, and they become a unofficial trusted advisor within the company, within the project, for this technology, this process, whatever that thing is.
I feel like this is like how every single person on the planet got into SharePoint.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember back at the very beginning of my career when I was a BA, and I was actually I had done some development stuff, and then I did some BA work, and I was on a project, and I was basically connecting the stakeholders and the developers, and I was kind of going back and forth, and it was really cool because like one was on the stakeholders were on the third floor and the developers were on the first floor, and my job, my literal job, was to print a spreadsheet and run it upstairs and sit down with the stakeholders and go over the spreadsheet and take all their notes manually with a pen, like old analog style, and then go back down to the developers, and then they would give their notes, and then I would explain what the stakeholders had to say, and then I would grab that, I would go upstairs, and I would talk, and I literally did this, ran back and forth three floors on a pretty regular basis. And then one day somebody came to me and said, hey, we got this brand new tool. It came with TFS. We'd love for you to take a look at it. And we think you're gonna really like it, and maybe you can figure it out. And they had given me SharePoint, and so I figured out how to store stuff there and set alerts so that basically whenever the developers had comments, it would alert the stakeholders, and when the stakeholders had comments, it would alert the developers, and I was in the middle, so I got all the alerts. And I'm like, oh my God, this has changed my life. And so then I went and I told everybody how amazing SharePoint was. And from that point on, at every job that I went into, because I was contracting, I was like, SharePoint is this really cool tool. And they're like, I like that SharePoint thing. And I'm like, let me explain to you like how it solved my problem. And then all of a sudden they were like, this is cool. So I think when you think of a champion, the reason I tell that story is because oftentimes we think that champions are designated or they're identified or they're made. And I'm telling you, I think many of them are kind of self-motivated.
I think the majority of them are, and that's more of what we're talking about today. I was just thinking like my first experience where I think because I had a really good manager back when I worked for EDS. So this is a long time ago. This is towards the beginning of my career, almost 30 years ago. And she was fantastic and really embraced when people would step up and say, that's an area I'm really passionate about that I'd like to go do more. And great example that one of the I was a BA, one of the other BAs was part of the BA and technical writing organization, wanted to be really good at the say change management, but like the systems planning. And so she said, hey, look, I've been reading a lot about this. I've been learning about these other like ETL technologies and different tools and things out there for creating visualizations around process flows, work business systems and process flows. And so she became the de facto expert on those types of tools. But also whenever there was a business system change, like let's go grab Izzy, let's go get her into the room around this. So she became like the subject matter expert on that, championing those things. And it went up like kind of the ranks of people like, hey, we need to have this discussion. How does this impact the business flow? So even though we were stretched across a matrixed environment, a number of different projects, initiatives that were always going on. anything that had to do with business process change, like we were able to go grab her, this BA that was known and would then champion those aspects out. So a lot of champions, what's good about this, and I've played this role as well, where like I just for a project, I've being a technology guy and that side of things, where I would then go and become like the expert, and I was doing support, I was answering questions on how to use the new technology, where I had stepped up. It wasn't my job to go and do that, but where we had an outside consultant that was providing the professional training. Like I got it very quickly. I knew that, the new technology. And so when people would ask questions, I was just often the one that would go and help with the new tools. So that's the idea of what a champion does primarily.
Well, and I think the common driver behind all of that is that you're excited about what it is you're championing. And I'll tell you, this is the project failure file. So I'll tell you what not to do. Because I've been on so many projects where they define who the champion is, or maybe the sponsor says, I want to be the champion because I saw this ad in a magazine. I always like to tease CIOs and CTOs who want to champion something because they read an article or they saw an ad. And so now they have decided to implement it in their organization, but they're going to be the sponsor and the champion based on an ad that they saw, based on a presentation at a conference. And then all of a sudden they come in and everybody's really unsure why nothing really ever happened.
Right. On the other side of that too is that like it's part of the job description. It's like, look, there's somebody that come in and say, it's like, well, it's my job to go and do that. Like, I mean, this is an example of not this is a mistake that's made more as a cultural aspect. But if it's like I've been told on numerous occasions at different companies, like, well, that's not your job description. And I've said, and you've heard me say this in separate episodes, is that usually I say, like, look, I have this experience doing this in the past. I know it needs to be done, and there's nobody to do that task. Therefore, we know it needs to be done. No one's doing it. I have experience with it. I will do it until we backfill, find the person. To some level, like if you are making the mistake of shutting people down, who are trying to help be champions and drive things. I like what they're doing is that they're enthusiastic about something. They're encouraging adoption. They're helping navigate if you're experiencing organizational resistance, somewhere for your project. Why would you discourage people from helping your project move forward? So again, another mistake, the thing not to do is, one, discourage people, tell them that's not your job to go and do that, because champions can come from anywhere, any role. And there's some, you can have a very real discussion around the scope of their role, especially if they're neglecting their day job, what they should be doing to help in other areas. But you should encourage people to step up, to learn new things, and to help champion things along. Especially anything to do in the broader topics around digital transformation. It's going to affect multiple lines of business, multiple areas, multiple roles. Why are you discouraging people from stepping up and doing more?
Well, and to add to that, there is not nowhere in any guide or best practice does it say that there's a limitation to how many champions you can have on a project. So we're not saying like, this is the champion. When we say
it's not a formal title, right? Yeah.
Who's the champion? There can be many champions. In fact, the more business champions you have, the better and the more successful your project's probably likely to be. So the more support, the more the merrier, right? So the more support you can bring in, the better. And to your point, we don't want them like neglecting their primary roles. We don't want them getting out of their jobs. But like, if you have several champions, that gives you the opportunity sometimes to, if one is busy with a project at the time or only one can come in, maybe you can kind of even share that load a little bit, where you've always got somebody in the room on the call that's excited about the project or excited about what it is that you're getting ready to use.
You think too, the most user groups, they started because you get a number of different people excited about a technology, want to learn, that realize, hey, this is the direction we're going. I need to go above and beyond, what's happening in my role. And so that's how an internal user group begins. So those are a bunch of champions that are just like, hey, nobody's doing anything. As I realize that we need to be talking more about this, we need to be sharing information. Like that is advocacy. That is evangelism. That is, I mean, that's what a lot of it is, using these keywords, but internally they're evangelists, they're advocates.
Yep. I love a good internal user group. It always makes my heart happy when somebody says we've started an internal user group. I'm like,
Like,
yes.
yay. Well, hey, that's where it all begins. And that's where you think about like, what are the impact of supporting, recognizing, supporting, nurturing your champions, is that, one, as we've talked about, you're developing advocacy, you're getting buy-in from that. You're also answering key end user questions. I mean, a lot of times the champions, because they're subject matter experts, they're in their roles, they're going to be closer to the problem area, closer to the data around your project. So they're really going to be able to help you with adoption by answering questions that, again, you might be coming as the outsider, as the PM, may not know the ground level details around a project that you're executing on. And so they can really help with adoption, especially if there's resistance in the organization. I
Yeah.
always love that. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say another piece to this is one of the things that people come and talk to me about is champions that run rogue, right? And this is a common problem we have, especially with people who are really excited about something. They're early adopters. They're like, I want to go do this thing, and the next thing you know, they're running rogue, and maybe they're either trying to run around your best practices because they want to be really excited about the tool. And I find that having a way to support your internal champions minimizes your risk of people running rogue, because you know who those people are that are early adopters, the people who are out there doing things. And if you kind of keep them close and give them an opportunity, they're more likely to help you than they are to hurt you. And then if they continue to run rogue, then you know who those people are. So it's a little bit easier to manage as well.
One of my Buckleyisms that I say all the time, the more that you involve people in the process, the more likely people will support the process. Even if they disagree with the process, they're more likely to participate in that. And it's just another way. It's another tool that you have to communicate out with what's happening with the project. It's a way to help facilitate the conversations between the project teams and users on relaying feedback, addressing any concerns that they have, any scenarios that they're addressing. Because if you've ever gone into, and I know we've both experienced this, where you're outlining the project and the status, and here's where we are, and here's the difficulties, here's these risks and things there, and you ask for questions, and nobody asks questions. And what's great is then to sit with your champions, like during the week, and be like, hey, what are people actually saying, like behind closed doors? Like, well, there's concerns about this. Why didn't anybody raise their hand and ask that question? There's a lot of reasons why people don't want to do that. They don't want to be, nobody wants to be seen as asking a stupid question or pointing out something that's obvious. And my experience is, if nobody's pointed out the obvious thing, it's usually because no one's thought of, in the planning team and the execution, that obvious thing. So obvious questions are great, because then you can say, all right, let's get that in the FAQs. We do have that answer. Or crap, we overlooked that item. We need to answer that obvious question.
Well, yeah, I think people are afraid. That's really what it boils down to. They're afraid. They're either afraid of being seen as, asking a dumb question, or being seen as somebody who's, maybe throwing somebody under the bus, or, things like that, when that's not their intention at all. They're really just trying to say, hey, there's this issue and I'm not entirely sure how to deal with it. And so I think, what not to do is exactly that, is, basically go into things and assume that those meetings are all 100% fine and nobody actually has any questions and nobody actually has any needs. But the truth of the matter is you're absolutely right. Because then I've been in a bazillion internal user group meetings or back end, support meetings like that, where all of a sudden everybody's kind of standing around and talking and they're all complaining or they're all bringing up these issues. And you're like, yeah, same thing. Why didn't you bring that up in the meeting? So oftentimes what I will do is if I overhear that, if they're unwilling or unsure of how to bring that up, I'll say, well, how about you just write up some of that and send it over to me, and then I'll get it back to the project team, or I'll get it back to the project manager, or whatever, in kind of a more neutral, anonymous, kind of mode. That way, at least that information gets back.
Yeah. Well, the last, like the impact bullet items that, how supporting champions has impact is we talk a lot about changing the culture of your organization. And as we often talk about, like, the organizations that are good at change, if they're really good at like looking for and adapting to, planning for, risk assessment around change, that is a culture that we should strive for, that we should seek out people that are strong at that, because you can handle anything that's thrown at you. If you think of like high performing organizations, it's usually those that are really good with adapting to and moving, embracing change and using that as a strength. And this is a key component, I feel, of a change focused culture. It by recognizing and supporting champions, it really helps set the example for, hey, this is a way that we allow people to grow within their role and recognize their voices. But shows that, hey, we're actually listening and collaborating with our team members in our projects. So thinking about, Sharon, thinking about looking at what we can learn from this, examples of projects with strong internal champions. Do you have any projects that really come to mind at the forefront of this, key traits of what made them effective?
Yeah, no, absolutely. In fact, I got to work on a really, what I would consider probably one of the highest maturity level projects that I've worked on in the bulk of my career, was when I was at Black and Beach, and we basically migrated off of, there was like an old intranet and a older SharePoint farm, and we moved on to, I think at that point we're moving to SharePoint 2010. So it was around that time period. And what was really great is, because it's a large organization with a lot of different areas and divisions and departments and things like that, one of the things that we worked on early on with the organizational management department was really identifying champions for each business area that could then represent those business units, not just at a project level, but at a solution level, at a day-to-day level. And we went out and we really kind of got to know the people, and we knew the people who were coming into the internal user group, and we knew the people who were really speaking well about the product, and we knew the people who were, also like well influenced and influencing within their groups and their organizations. And they were not all managers. In fact, I don't think many of them were managers. We had a couple, but not very many. We really kind of looked throughout the entire organization to identify those people. And then what we did is we brought them in into kind of like what I would say like a mini MVP program, where we brought them in and we gave them early training, early information, allowed them to provide feedback. And what really came of that is that project in general, I think, was super successful, because not only did we do it and then we rolled it out, but we had people in each area who were able to provide feedback along the way, and also then champion the project overall as it kind of moved toward being complete. It's probably one of just like the best examples of a project I've ever been able to be part of.
That's very cool. No, I love it when, especially when you have an executive team that's supportive of building this out. It is so
Mhm.
key. I was thinking of, kind of moving over into strategies for supporting and empowering internal champions. And you mentioned it here in your example too. Is first, what are the resources and training that you make available to people to do this? I mean, people are more likely to step up and be willing to, again, they've got their job description, they've got what they're doing day in, day out. New initiative comes up, they've got some prior experience, so they're very excited about, passionate about, like, whatever the new direction, the new technology, they want to take that initiative. Like, what resources, what training, what knowledge are there? Where can they go and they ask for help? So even you can formalize some of that, the materials out there. Like, hey, if you're interested in championing, there's, if you want to go and do more, here are other areas where you can even communicate. Like, hey, these are areas where we would love to have support. You could even, ask that question to, maybe somebody's not volunteering their additional time. Say, hey, is anybody interested in being like you use the example of like learning SharePoint? Is anybody interested around this technology, like regardless of your role, just so we can have some different perspectives of people doing additional training around that? If Again, if you're recognizing people for that, I've worked with organizations where they, for people that set up, they did spot awards, cash awards for that, for people that went above and beyond. They were actually doing a lot of work, and but they opened themselves up for the opportunity first to then, you know, excel at that, really become a strong, very helpful person within that role, and an advocate, an evangelist. And then the company had, a reward that they put in place for people that really went above and beyond as those champions, to recognize them, giving them award. It went on their resume, it's on their LinkedIn profile. Plus, there's a cash component to that. It doesn't always have to be cash. It can, just recognizing people that are doing that. Um, but it's to provide resources on, hey, here's how you could do more. Here's how you can actually step in to actually define, being a champion means. Uh, Again, will help people to better understand, hey, this is something the company supports me going outside of my comfort area and doing more.
Yeah, I definitely seen the opposite to this, and under the what not to do headline, I so many times where I have been worked with organizations, in different roles, and come in and helped with things, and where it's basically the opposite of, people would get excited and they'd really want to promote something, or they'd want to participate in something, and they would get shut down very quickly by their manager. Oh, no, 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 that takes away time from what you're doing. We don't want you to push into that. We don't want you to support in that. Like, you need to be 100% focused on the role at hand. And while I understand from a trying to manage your people perspective, kind of what you're saying, at the same time, I think, giving them that opportunity to kind of spread their wings and learn more things and help the organization as a whole. They are an independent contributor, but oftentimes it's a team thing too, where we all need to help each other. I have definitely gotten to work at organizations where there have been, everything from awards to recognition. And I can honestly tell you that I highly associate well-managed systems around rewards and recognitions with high maturity organizations, just because they're realizing that the reward of you showing up is not a paycheck. They're realizing there's more to it than that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, I know some of you might be that are watching, that are more on the small to mid-size, company. You're not that mature around that. It doesn't mean that, hey, you can't still go and support. It might just be less formal, but to still recognize and support those people that step up and become champions. I mean, it's still, again, you're building that foundation within your culture, to recognize people there. I mean, other strategies for building this out is one. I mean, we always talk about feedback loops, communication channels. One thing to do is, when you do recognize that people are acting, unofficially as champions and helping out different areas, is to, to reach out and connect with them. As I mentioned earlier, like, have meetings to say, like, hey, what are your thoughts here? What are people not saying officially in the meetings? So making that official, but then also, encourage your champions to to kind of highlight their takeaways, their learnings, their success stories, so that because that'll help with even reinforce the values of the project and encourage wider adoption. But it will again, that can be a reward right there for those people of giving them time up in front, demonstrating, hey, this is what I'm doing in this other area. That again helps people, especially those that are trying to build their career up, give them opportunities to get that face time in front of an audience.
No, I was exactly thinking that those are presentation skills that you're getting experience with. Also, depending on what you're talking about and what you're promoting, it could be visibility to management, senior management, executive leadership, depending on what you're working on. And so, from a professional perspective, a lot of people are like, I remember early in my career, I was always a champion. I know this surprises you immensely that I liked to champion things, but I get excited about things and I like to share them and I want to help people. And I got, a lot of people give me a hard time like, why would you buy your own books? Why would you go to your own training? Why would you go, speak, on your own dime? Why would you, take time out of your regular work schedule to go participate in these things? And I don't think people understand how much that helps you professionally in your career, to grow you as a person and to grow your visibility within the organization. And so a lot of times what you'll find with champions, sometimes they're just excited about things, but sometimes they're the types of people that you really, really know are the people that you really want to promote up within your organization.
Yeah. Well, thinking about practical tips for implementation. So somebody who's watching this that is thinking, okay, well, how do I actually go and take action? What do I go do next? How would you direct people to go and get started?
Yeah, so this is, you can kind of think about it a couple different ways, right? I would say start thinking about it holistically so that it's already set up so that when you do have a specific project, you kind of know where to go. But the idea really is if you start to hear, one person getting excited about something or multiple people getting excited about something, or you have an initiative around a specific topic. So for example, our business wants to, grow our use of AI by 50%, or we want to, implement a certain tool, or we want to better our intranet, right? Whatever those business initiatives are, I would holistically look for people in your organization that are excited about that particular topic or tool or technique. And then I would get one person to basically even just do like a once a month little meetup to say, okay, how are you using this right now? What are you trying to do with it? And talk to each other. And just like you said, create that kind of internal user group. The idea with this is that now I understand the different, groups of people that are interested in different things. And then as we progress in that initiative, as we move into project-based planning, we now kind of know where to source those people. And if you aren't already holistically doing that, so now we just have to go find people, then I think it's a matter of at a project level, identifying who are the people who we think are going to be able to help us understand the needs of the people or the users and help influence the needs of the users and maybe bring them in and have them be part of that program for just that project.
I was going to go more fundamental, Sharon. Not to sound like I'm scolding you, but I totally am. No, if you at the beginning of a project, kind of project management fundamentals of having a clear vision, scope of your project. If you have that clearly defined up front, that's going to give people a better understanding of here's opportunities for me to go in and do these things. And again, to be very explicit, if it's a new technology, if it's a new business process, if it's a new partnership or outside relationship or new customer area, any of those things offer areas for you to say, and hey, if there's anybody that knows anything about this new client is in the manufacturing industry, if anybody has manufacturing background or passion around knowledge in that space, that could be help be a champion in this area. So there are ways that you can define that up front and ask for volunteers and see if people step into that. But I think where you have to be careful and what not to do is assign people to that, as we've said again and again, that this should be like present the opportunities, and sometimes no one will step up into that, and that's fine. But it needs to be a more organic, authentic, of volunteer themselves into that role. You can't force the champion role on people, because then
It'll
they're just
backfire. It'll
they're just
totally backfire in your face. I
right.
promise you.
Yep. And then because then they'll push back and be like, just like, why I'm being forced to do something that's nothing to do with my job, and I'm super busy over in this area. It's like, right, it just does not work.
Here, Christian, I want you to love this product that you really don't care about.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make it part of your, expectations and part of your job to be in love with a product that you could care less about.
Here's a great example for me personally. If like you asked me to go and I want you to be an expert on our accounting processes, I'd be like, okay, just shoot me right now. Like that's so not me, not interested. I'll say that my MBA, my lowest grades, they're both B's. Like I did pretty well, but my two worst grades were in managerial finance and accounting, which was the second one. It was all double entry. Like I just could not wait for that class to be over. Love stats, but I'm telling you, accounting, like hire somebody to do this. Why?
But we do it all the time. And I think that's the frustrating part, is that every day there's a project that people assign champions to. And every day they say, yes, absolutely, I'll do my job, check, check, check. And then they don't. They just disappear. They say they're going to be excited. They say they're going to help. They disappear. And everybody wonders why. And the reason is because they're not truly a champion. They're being voluntold to be a champion. And so
Voluntold. I love that.
they're not going to deliver.
Hashtag voluntold. Yep. No, that's right. I mean, other things too, practical tips. One of the other things, and I mentioned this earlier, of having regular knowledge sharing sessions with the champions. So I think there is, once people kind of step into that role and you are recognizing them, I think you can formalize a few things. It's a fine touch. You don't want to discourage people that are volunteering, that are going the extra mile in that role. But you could, depending on what it is. What I've done in the past, what's worked well, is when I then ask them, "Hey, could you share, like we talked about, like these scenarios and what your experience was? Could you maybe do like a brown bag lunch? Like, so let's sit around and you present and share like what you've seen, what you've worked on, probably some of the questions that we've answered, but that you're seeing recurring questions." So to do knowledge sharing sessions on a regular basis, maybe make it every other Friday, for example. Hey, we've got this new initiative. Let's look at it from the end user perspective and share the common questions. That also then draws out more questions. And again, where I've been the technology expert, but the champion sitting in those meetings is answering most of the questions from their perspective. And I may jump in and correct some things from the technology standpoint, the process standpoint, or the timeline or budget standpoint, but otherwise let the champions drive a lot of that. They've got the one-on-one relationship with the rest of the end users. They're the trusted advisor. And this is I guess I should use as example, like being in a couple different support operations groups. Sometimes if you go look at a support team, there's often one or two people that are like the go-to people for every problem. And obviously you can't beat them up with every project, every problem that's out there. But when people are stuck, especially more junior people in the organization, there's usually the go-to people to go get the answers because they've been around, or they've got that experience, or they're just super extra helpful. That's usually the key. Those are often those champions. And so that's actually something that you can do, is you can ask people, like, who's your go-to expert? If you had this question, where would you go? They come to like, well, to you, be like, oh, well, thank you. But like, no, who else on the team that's not the project manager? And that could be an indicator of where to go to kind of tease out of your organization like, hey, this is the possible champion.
We've all known this since like elementary school, right? So think back to show and tell, like on Fridays when you had show and tell, and there was always like the kid in your class who loved dinosaurs, and so they wore the dinosaur shirt and they brought their dinosaur things and they told you about the dinosaurs. And imagine if a teacher says, okay, come to your show and tell us, we all know that he's going to talk about dinosaurs. Like everybody knows this, right? But then imagine if the teacher's like, okay, little dinosaur kid, today you're going to talk about trains. And that's what you need to love. And that's what you need to talk about. And the poor little kid who loves dinosaurs is like, well, I just want to talk about dinosaurs. I don't want to talk about trains. And so you got to think about this like show and tell, right? When you're talking about who do I go to? We know, all right? You know who likes which things. You know who supports which things. And the key is really to not just support them, but to allow them and encourage them to be supportive of the things that they really enjoy and that they're good at. Because then I think, they can share that knowledge with your organization.
Yep.
Agreed. We need show and tell for adults. That's what we need.
That's what we're talking about here. That's the best practice here. So to wrap this topic, thinking about kind of summary of some of the key takeaways here. One is to recognize the champions, and then 2 is to support them. So they help in a number of areas to advocate for projects, to drive adoption, to foster that cultural change that we're all striving for. So I guess like my call to action would be to encourage all of you to identify, nurture, and support those internal champions. They're not just going to appear suddenly all the time. Sometimes they do, but that you are looking for. In fact, I used to put this in my project plan, was to identify some key internal champions. That was a line item on a project, so that it just kept us aware. Sometimes they'd be like, well, next off on our list of things to do, to talk about, is our champions. It'd be like, yeah, I've not seen anybody surface yet on that. Let's just keep it as a running item with the leadership team to review until they appear, they organically show themselves, and then we start working on supporting them.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly it. Is, it's helping people, identifying them, it's recognize them, it's showing everybody around them that what they're doing is respected by the organization and by the project, and making
Hopefully,
sure
yes.
That's the right answer. The wrong answer is to just say, nobody cares about this and you're going to do what I tell you to do.
It's not your job. It's not your job.
Good job.
Yeah. Don't worry about that. No, I truly believe that internal champions are not only vital to the success of an individual project, but it's part of what you need to support and have as part of your culture. If you truly want to embrace innovation and continuous improvement and change management, it is critical to bake that into the cake.
Not only is it critical, it's a business differentiator. I mean, when we're talking about maturity levels, this is the kind of stuff that if you invest just a teeny tiny amount of time and energy and resources into this, your results are just going to be amazing. You're going to get so much out of it.
Yeah. Great topic, Sharon. Again, I know we could talk for another hour just around this, but hopefully this was useful to everybody that watched. Thank you for watching the show. Again, if you'd like to get in touch, you could reach out and follow, Sharon, myself. There's a lot going on with this series. If you're not already following, subscribing to this, we're actually going to be starting a newsletter. Well, so weekly. So actually Sharon and I have a meeting on the calendar now where we're going to go and plan this stuff out to start up, where we're actually going to provide additional detail around each of the topics that we've already covered, and more topics going forward in the future. So it'll be a weekly email of project failure files, best practices, sometimes with worksheets and different areas and things that you can go and do and implement immediately. And sometimes others that you'll just read and go, I'm going to store that. That's good information.
It's like a ninja pill. It goes in your brain, and then like 3 months later it goes pow.
You never know when the ninja's going to strike. That's right. Well, that's it. Always, like, I remember when I took my first Kenpo karate class They said, look, there are 57 ways to kill a person. It's like, but you just need to remember one when you're being attacked. They're like, that's right. Have that knowledge. You can also find all the past episodes out on the Tube of Views. You follow it, my profile on Buckley Planet. Sharon has it on her profile as well. So you find either one of us, you'll find back episodes. And then we also have our community out there on Facebook and our other future community that we're going to build out. Hopefully before the end of the year, everything will be live. So you'll get redirected once it's live from the Facebook page, but we'll be actively promoting it then. So. All right. I messed up at the beginning and showed a little bit of the outro, but yeah, I guess we'll wrap here and we'll be back next Monday and every Monday into the foreseeable future at 9 a.m. Pacific with another topic. And we'll see you then. Thanks for watching.
Bye.
Bye.